Invigorate, Embiggen, Legalos is quickly Reflexes. Let's go.
Next on Eternal Durdles. Before we get started, I want to give a quick thanks and appreciation out there to all the Durdle Maniacs that support us on Patreon. Without these people, the podcast could not afford the production upgrades and time we devote to it. If you appreciate the content we create, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/EternalDurdles. Now on to the show. Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me this week, very special guest, FenrusCloud, Sam. Sam, how are you doing, man?
Hey, Zach. It's very nice to be on. I'm doing great, actually. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to talk about Infect because, I think the deck is still excellent, and we have some very exciting things coming up. So glad to be here and being able to talk with you guys about Infect.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Infect fan. Before I moved from New York to Philly, I had my full set of duels and everything, and I sold them. But the last deck that I was playing pretty competitively to a couple of top 8s was Infect. I was on like a Green Sun Zenith version of the deck, and I don't know. I've just always kind of been a big fan of Infect, especially when my pet deck Rug Delver kind of hit the can for a while. Infect was a great option to get past all the Elves decks. And all of this was back when Deathrite Shaman was a card to be able to like compete against those decks. So Infect to me is just like I really love it, and for what it's worth, it has been I believe undervalued for a small amount of time, and obviously you haven't undervalued it, but I think overall the community has undervalued Infect as like a viable option.
Oh, for sure. I couldn't agree with you more there. I mean, I know I am biased. I realize that, don't get me wrong, but I really believe that Infect is still a very, very good deck, even though nobody plays it anymore. I think it's so weird because when I go to a tournament, I don't play a lot of Magic Online currently because I don't have a lot of time, not as much as I used to. But when I'm playing in Paper Magic, like if I look at the last 10 tournaments, I think I went either top 8 or was live or top 8 until the very end, every single time I played. And I've tried different decks from time to time, but it's funny because every time I play a different deck, it always feels to me like just not as good as as Infect is, which is something that probably a lot of people would disagree with me. But again, I'm biased. I realize that.
Yeah.
But it's lovely to hear that you've been playing Infect for a long time as well, and you can still do good with the deck for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people look at Infect and say like, oh, this is why Infect is like not the deck I want to play or whatnot, is like cards like Snuff Out, free, obviously.
Yeah.
They see Orcish Bowmasters and the whole deck is full of X1s, and of course those are all issues. But minus Snuff Out, which is definitely like not the best place to be if you're playing a deck that's playing that. I think all the same issues Infect had before are still there. Like, people had to spend mana or counter your pump spells, to stop the deck from winning, and that hasn't changed. Everybody knows how to play against Infect for the most part. Like, don't die to a berserked invigorated creature. But I think people really underestimate the fact that not a whole lot has changed in the last 5 years for Infect. It's still as strong as it was before, and not for nothing, it has kind of always been in that tier 1.5, tier 2 category as far as the best decks in the format are concerned, but severely undervalued, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's very clear that you've been playing Infect for a while now, because this is a discussion that I usually don't have. Mostly when people talk to me, I have to spend the first 10 minutes explaining why Infect is still
nothing has changed.
Deck. No, I mean, if you look at Bowmasters, right? I'm not going to lie, in the beginning, it was a bit of a deal. You had to work around, you had to change your deck, but the thing is, Infect is still a aggro-based deck which plays cantrips, right? And as we've seen with Delver, if you play cantrips, you can adjust, but you have to be willing to take the time to actually work on your 60 cards in the main, or even 75, and figure out a way to deal with the meta. And once you do that, well, it's going to be good. The thing is, I think that not a lot of people are playing Infect anymore, so that means that if Delver has an issue with a deck, right, you give it 2 weeks and the internet has solved the problem, if I can say it like that. Because there are 1 million people working on it. But right now, if Infect has a problem, like Bowmasters was printed, like, who am I going to go to for help? I mean,
Yeah.
not a lot of people are still playing the deck, so I knew that it was mostly going to be me doing it. But I like that. I really that's the thing that I enjoy. But it didn't take me long. If you look at my list, it has like Royal Treatment, and that was an all-star. And I actually shared on my Twitter a picture recently that literally said, this is why Infect can adapt. And there was a situation where my opponent had 2 Bowmasters on the field and a Plague Engineer, and I just had a lone Blighted Agent with the Royal Treatment under it, which means that they just fired off double Bowmasters, didn't kill it, and then had Plague Engineer, but it was +1/+1. And I just killed them the turn after. And that just felt, I mean, I'm still riding on that high today. It was so nice.
One of the things we talked about when we were looking at the and I wasn't sure if it worked this way or not, but one of the things we talked about when we did the set review for Eldraine was Royal Treatment can save 2 creatures, right? Like, you could give your creature hexproof and then put a Royal Roll on another creature. If they've tapped out, both creatures are safe.
I mean, the treatment was, when I saw it, the Ward one is just so good, because if you also played like against control decks, I had situations where my opponent plays like Teferi, which is always such a horrible card to play against. But I just said, okay, in response, I'm going to Royal Treatment my threat, and it resolves. Even though I had counter magic, like, it resolves, and then they couldn't even bounce the creature because they had Ward 1, so they can't bounce it. And then I just kill them in my turn. So
yeah, you're like, okay, well, during my main phase, I'll invigorate my guy and berserk him, and
yeah, it's
I guess you can't cast berserk, right?
Yeah, that's true. But you can if you do it in the main phase.
Well, berserk has to be cast during combat, I believe, right?
I think before combat, if I remember that correctly.
Before the combat damage step.
Otherwise, I've been playing the deck very wrong for.
Yeah, no. It's been. It just shows how long ago it was that I was playing Infect, because Teferi was not a card that I had to deal with. In fact, when that card got spoiled, I put it into my deck because I was like, well, this is great. If I can just like get to my turn with like an Inkmoth Nexus, I win the game.
I've played Teferi in when I won the Paris Magic Card Market tournament. I had Teferi in my deck. It's really good against control decks, so I really like it there. Or at least it used to be, not anymore with prismatic endings, etc. But it has been very, very good for quite a long time. And in general,
prismatic ending is a tough card against Infect already, because you really don't want sorcery speed removal. You want to be able to react in time to what your opponent's doing.
Inkmoth Nexus, that's the all-star against control. It's so good. So in general, when we started saying and evaluating Infect right now, I think it's important to stress that it's still a blue-based deck that can adapt. And I think the only reason why we don't see Infect as much anymore is just because people seem to have forgotten that it exists. And what I do, this is a downside of the deck. It is very fragile, right? If you make one mistake, you're gonna 3-for-1 yourself. Like, if I have Glistener Elf and I invigorate Berserk on my creature, my opponent goes like, okay, swords, and I don't have anything going on. I just lose the game, right? With a Delver, if you fire off a lightning bolt to someone's face and you should have kept it for the threat next turn, that's not the end of the world. I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's not immediately game over, and that's why I think a lot of people are staying away from Infect, because it is fragile, and in the beginning, you will lose all the time. Like, literally.
Yeah, it is a skill tester deck for sure. Yeah,
definitely. I think it's
you
one
have
of
to
the
lose
most.
A lot. You have to lose a lot in the beginning to win. Like, I think you win big with this deck, especially because people aren't paying attention to it. But in the beginning, you really have to learn the ins and outs of the deck, and you have to understand what's going on in your opponent's head, right? And I think that is the biggest concern, especially in a world now where, like, we don't have Gitaxian Probe, which was, when I started playing the deck, we had access to Gitaxian Probe, and that was great. You could just see what your opponent was thinking. You're like, okay, now I know what you're thinking. I even diddled around with Peak for a while, just because being able to look at your opponent's hand was that strong. But I think I think that is the hardest part of the deck, is like understanding how your opponent wants to react to this deck.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. And it's funny you mentioned Gitaxian Probe, because Gitaxian Probe made the deck like insanely good. Just watch the other dude's hand and see what's going on. And okay, I can just kill you, so let's do that. The thing is that once I couldn't agree more. But once you get really good with the deck, you know what's going on, and you can sometimes read the opponent. I find it hard to explain it to you, but I can just sometimes, depending on how my opponent's playing to the board, see what they have in their hand. It's difficult not to know what I'm talking about without having like an example. And I found myself that even when Gitaxian Probe was legal, in the end, when I started getting really good with the deck, I even started cutting them. In the end, I actually only played 2 Gitaxian Probes because I didn't need it. I'd rather have a Ponder because you could usually figure out what was going on, and then I no longer needed it, which is so weird to say right now.
It is sort of like training wheels for sure.
Exactly. Yeah.
One of the funny things about that era was so the whole like what is going on in your opponent's brain sort of thing was I recall playing at a pretty big event. I got to the top 8 and I think I got into the top 4. And to get into the top 8, I had played against Gerard Fabiano, well known. I think he was on Grixis Delver at the time. And he ended up beating me, and I snuck in, like literally like on tiebreakers, got into 8th place, won my next match, and in the next match, this is the semis. I went up against the quarterfinals. I went up against his friend. He was going into the finals, and I went up against his friend, and we got to this point in the game where I won game 1. Game 2, he was completely dominating me, and I had Viridian Corruptor. The 2/2 infect that like kills kills an artifact when it comes into play. And that was all I had, and I had an Invigorate in my hand, and that was it. And my opponent had, I forget how he knew, but he knew that I had an Invigorate in my hand. He had perfect information, and he had been basically just ruining my board with a Grimlovmancer. Had no cards left in his graveyard. So he's just sitting there staring at my Viridian Corruptor, with I think like a Grimlovmancer and a Deathrite Shaman. So like there was really I couldn't attack into it because he just killed my only possible out. And he cast Ponder, and I had already seen his hand earlier, and I knew he had a daze, and I was like, oh, the game's over. Like I literally said to him, oh, the game's over. You're gonna daze your own Ponder, and then let it like pay it. He had plenty of mana out, pay it, and then you'll just use that mana to or use those 2 cards to get rid of my my Viridian Corruptor with your Grimlovmancer. And the guy, like, I saw the play on the board, like, this is what I would do, And I think me stating that freaked the guy out. And Gerard's behind him, like, staring at him like, oh my God, like, obviously this is what you do. And the guy sat there for a minute. He's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like, he was playing into some, like, major ploy I had. And so he didn't do that. He just drew the cards from the Ponder, and only had 1 card in his graveyard. And so I was like, oh, okay. Next turn, I drew a Berserk and attacked and killed him. And Gerard's like the whole time is just like, what's going on? No! Like...
Another thing why I love the deck, the mind games. And people are so afraid.
You just win.
Yeah, and people are so afraid of Infect, as they should be. And this is what surprises me, right? Like, I'm hearing from all the time, from everywhere I come, and people talk to me about Infect, of course. And I sometimes get the question like, why are you still playing the deck? Why are you not playing a different deck? And I always say, I think it's good. I really think it is.
Yeah.
And it's funny because people don't think that Infect is good. That's clear. Just look at the data. Nobody plays it anymore. However, every time people play against me, they are very afraid, and nobody wants to play against Infect. Why is that if the deck's that bad? It's so weird to me, right?
Yeah.
If it was really that bad, people wouldn't be afraid, right?
Well, it's the heuristics of remembering what to do on top of the fact that, like, the deck is, like I said, the deck is as good as it's ever been, and soon, I think, to be very good. But I think one of the things that really gets people is the fact that the deck we had Julian Knob on last week, and one of the really great things that he said was, there's a Doyle Bronson quote about poker. It's about putting a man to all of his chips, like No Limit Hold'em. And this is a deck that can do that. This is a deck that can constantly be like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
Do you have it?
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
Like if you are constantly putting your opponent in that situation, one, there's just the mental energy your opponent has to deal with throughout the entire day, like dealing with decks like that. They have to have so many options to figure out what you're doing, because basically what Infect really is Infect is a Delver deck with a combo kill, right? Like you have access to Force of Will, you have access to Daze, but then you're like, oh, and I'm going to win here. And that's why I started playing it, because I was like, this is just Delver, in play patterns, maybe you're not playing Wastelands per se, but you have all the same access to the fun police aspects of Delver, and then you just get to be like, cool, I stopped your combo, and now I'm going to kill you if you're playing against a combo deck, right? If you're playing against a mid-range or control deck, you have to put them on so many different options of like what can it possibly happen, and they have to always assume that you have it.
Yeah, it's another reason why I really love the deck. People are afraid of it, and I think Infect is really one of the most difficult decks to play. But it's also one of the most difficult decks to play against, because you can literally die out of nowhere at any given time. So you have to respect everything, but you can't do that, right? Where we as the Infect players have to find the correct turn to go for it, other people have to really navigate their way through what we are going to try and do. I really like the deck in general, because it's after playing it for now almost 10 years, it's still as fun as it was in the beginning. And I've never had that with a different deck. Sometimes decks, they get a bit stale from time to time, or you really want to do something else. And I've never had that with Infect, because of the way like the deck, as the years have gone by, the deck has become more challenging to play, but it makes it also even more exhilarating when you can actually win and adapt your deck. Because every game that you play with it and you win, it really feels like you deserved it. Not like I played this card and I win, right? No, it feels like I deserve to win here, because I navigated through myself perfectly. And every loss you get very often feels like, if I would have done this or this differently, I could have probably won. I'm not saying that it's true, but that's how it feels, and that's why you want to keep on playing.
Yeah, the deck has a lot of agency. You always feel like it's on you to make the right decisions, and if you don't, you know exactly where you went wrong, right? You're like, yep, there it is. That was the spot. Like I could have respected X, Y, or Z. I didn't. I made. You generally make a calculated risk when you're going for it, anyhow.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to respect, what your opponent's doing, but when you win, you're just like, yep, I did it right. It just feels so good.
Mm-hmm, yeah. And I had situations where like people are watching my table and people are going away because they think, yeah, this game is over. And then when I'm done, I actually made it possible that I squeeze out a win. And people are like, how? I can't see how. And I'm like, yeah, I attack with a noble hierarch. And if I have enough pump spells, that's regular damage.
Sometimes you get people with regular damage.
Exactly.
But the fun thing is when people decide to not respect your regular damage and are like, yeah, I'll just take 8 on the Sylvan Library, and you're like, okay, I'm in. But like, I got a Berserk and an Invigorate. You're only going to gain 3 life. I'm going to do 5.
Exactly. And that's where you get the real skill things, right? Because sometimes I even play differently against different players, if that makes sense. If I see my opponents, like if I'm playing against a very skilled opponent, of course, I know that they're going to play differently than newer players. And even that changes sometimes the way I play. Even when I have a very local meta, I play against skillful players on the same deck. I even play differently against them, because I know that they make small differences. And I don't feel that with any other deck that I've ever played. Because that's another thing right now with Infect being gone, if I can say it like that, is I get more and more free wins. I'm getting readers these days where people are like, what's that creature? And they have to read Glistener Elf. And then I'm like, ooh, if this is your first time playing against the deck, I mean, it's horrible, right? Because you don't know what's going on, and that's a plus. You will, if you're playing a big tournament.
One of the great things about the deck is if it is if people are underrating the deck, there's less people that are prepared for it.
Definitely. And even like if I'm playing against like some of the best players in the world, even they do not know what I have in my deck right now, because even that's not a deck that you're going to see online unless
there's no stock list. Yeah,
exactly. There is no stock list, and I try to abuse this because in my local meta where I play, people do know me and they do know my list. So every tournament I go to, I swap around like at least 2 or 3 cards. Because you have options, and I don't want people to know what I'm playing. And this is something that Infect can do. You can have like these flex slots, right? 1 crop rotation, and one Stifle, stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's not bad, and a one-of is never going to completely change around the game plan. And then if I haven't played crop rotation in a while, I will probably just slam it in my deck because people do not respect the end of turn crop rotation anymore.
Oh
and
man,
once they've seen
crop
it,
rotation for Inkmoth Nexus into the win is just like, that is chef's kiss. It's like the best thing.
Exactly. And I remember the days where I had my sideboard was 15 different cards. I loved that. Card quality right now is so powerful that that's no longer the case, but I have a lot of top 8s where I had 15 different sideboard cards.
How do you feel about Teferi's response?
I play that. I actually love that card. I kept like some scores on my notebook, every weird thing that I've done with Teferi's response, honestly. Yep. But unfortunately, I think the days of Teferi's response.
I think we've moved past it. Yeah, I know.
My pet card right now is Great Sable Stag. I've been in love with that card for a very long while now. And it's becoming quite of a joke with my friends and people who know.
Sable Stag. Yeah. I have to look this up.
To read. Yeah, you have to look it up. And I'll just let you read it, and then let's hear what you think about it.
All right, let's see here. Great Sable Stag. Oh, okay, yeah, I remember this guy. So this is a 3/3 for 1 and 2 green. It's a elk. It can't be countered, and it has protection from blue and black.
Exactly. So this reads, against Death Shadow, you win the game and can't be counted.
Yeah. So and I the card I played instead of this was True Nemesis.
Yeah, sure. That you can also play True Nemesis for sure. But I really liked the Great Sable Stag more because it can't be counted. And there was a period where Death Shadow was like tier 1, and that was a very difficult deck to deal with. It was probably one of the worst matchups. And then I just played
between Thoughtseize, stymieing your early situation, and then of course they have Toxic Deluge, which can really mess you up. A engineered plague or plague engineer on Phyrexian is pretty bad.
You can just name the entire deck. The deck is made to. And then I just started playing 2 Great Sable Stags in the sideboard, and if I had that one, it was just game over. It was that good, honestly, because they don't respect life total as against Infect as they shouldn't. And I just slam down Great Sable Stag, pump it twice, and they are dead. It was hilarious. I started playing it recently again because Death Shadow was seeing a resurgence. However, I've cut it again from the deck because now people are moving to blue-black scam, and it's not as good against them because they don't reduce their life totals as much. I'm just telling you this because it's clear that again we are seeing what Delver does, right? You against certain bad matchups, you change 1 or 2 cards and the matchup becomes fine, and that's it's the case for Infect too. You can, if you build your deck accordingly, you can adjust to the meta, which is what I've done every single time and why I'm still performing with the deck. Unfortunately, it's probably a bit more difficult and it takes more time to navigate through the options, and fewer people are playing it. And I think that's why people are slowly looking towards other directions, but that may change soon, I believe.
So I want to talk about some cards that I'm not seeing in your deck and ask about them. One is Venerated Rot Priest. It's a card that I highly rated, and admittedly I haven't played Infect since it came out, but I highly rated when the set came out, and I don't see it in your deck, so I'm wondering how you feel about that card.
I get that question a lot, and actually I play Modern as well, Infect of course, and I never rated Venerated Rot Priest as very high for Legacy specifically, and the reason for that is quite simple. You need a certain amount of pump spells to make Rot Priest good, right? Because otherwise, why would you want this? And if you look at usually Infect decks, we play like 8 pump spells, like 10 if you count Berserk. Is that enough to make Rot Priest work? I don't think so. It's usually just going to take 1 removal spell and then it gets killed. Maybe you can save it, but then you've lost your pump spell, which is something that you usually want to keep. You also need room in the deck, and space is very limited in the Infect deck. And I've given it a go because that's something that I enjoy, and it became very apparent that in Legacy, you really do not want Rot Priest. It's not good enough.
Because it has sort of a weird dichotomy with the pump spells. It doesn't, like, it itself is not an Infect creature, so the pump spells don't, like, get you there with it. You need to be pumping your other creatures. The only reason I really liked this card initially was because I think Shaper Sanctuary was a card I used to play. It had this Shaper Sanctuary situation where if your opponent decided to kill your guy, you got some value off of it, and that to me was like why the card had any sort of that was why the card had like a draw to me is because it basically made itself a lightning rod, so your opponent had to kill that instead of your Glistener Elf, right? Because I didn't want to just blow themselves out, and then they were taking an extra infect for every time they targeted one of your guys.
I agree with you there, and that's actually what I'm doing in Modern. But I think what we're talking about right now is you have to choose between quantity and quality. And the thing is, in Legacy, the pump spells, the quality is so high. We have Invigorate and Embiggen right now, and they are just so powerful, the pump spells. You really don't want too many pump spells. You want to go... Usually, if I'm able to like hit with one pump spell in a game, I tend to win by just attacking with the Nobles, etc. And in Modern, we choose the quantity rate, because the pump spells are a lot worse. If you look at my recent lists, I'm playing 0 pump spells in my current Legacy list that I'm also playing in Modern, except if you count like 2 Vines, that's it. That tells you all you need to know about Infect in Modern right now. It's a very different deck. And in Modern, I am playing Shapers. I'm also playing Spellskites, and Spellskite alongside Rot Priest becomes very good, because then you can just, I'm going to target my Rot Priest, bounce the Spellskite, you take 2, and my Rot Priest survives. I also draw a card. And if you can do it like that, it becomes very good. But that means you need a flurry of pump spells to make that one work. And that's not what we're doing in Legacy. We are firing off 1, maybe 2 pump spells, and if we fire off 2, the game is over. If we fire off 1, we don't need any others. And we are also only playing 8 to 10 pump spells, usually. So that's why I think Rot Priest is not what we are looking for in Legacy specifically.
Yeah. So from there, let's talk about Embiggen, because Embiggen is this new card. Is it on Magic Online yet?
Yeah, it is. They put it on Magic Online, I think, a month ago, something like that.
Okay, great.
Is we had this sweet moment where before Bowmasters got printed, that Embiggen was already legal, and I will never be able to prove it, but that was a timing where I think Infect was maybe tier 1. I think in that timing, I top-8'd every tournament I played, which was only 3. That's only like 3, so not impressive. But I tend to focus on paper Magic, and I always top-8'd when I played in that time period. But I couldn't play on Magic Online, unfortunately. So it was unfortunate that I was never able to just to show you how good that was.
Grind it out that way, yeah. So for the layman here, Embiggen is basically, for the most part, like +4/+4. Is that how that's working?
Yeah, so what Embiggen says is every non-Brushwag creature gets... So, okay, I think if I remember correctly, so it gets +1/+1 for each...
Super type, card type, and subtype.
Right, if it's a non-Brushwag. And they put that one on so you can't make changelings like a million.
I guess.
And that's the reason why. And that means that suddenly we have the Phyrexian errata is suddenly a buff, where in the past it was a downside, but now it's a buff. Because you can see on the cards, you can see the 3 types, and now you also have to include the Phyrexian. So
so you've got like Infect, Rogue, Phyrexian, right?
Yeah, Infect,
Insect, Rogue, Phyrexian, Elf, Rogue, Phyrexian? I forget what Glistener Elf is.
I think Glistener Elf is Elf, Warrior, Phyrexian, Creature. Those are the 4 types.
Okay.
So for Blood Rage, it's the same. It's +4/+4. And this is the big plus. On Inkmoth Nexus, it's +5/+5 at instant speed, which is insane. It really is so strong.
Because it's also an artifact, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a land, which is what makes the difference.
Yeah.
So +5/+5 at instant speed for 1 green is it's quite strong. It's the first pump spell that I'm playing 4 right now in my build, and the only pump spells I'm currently playing is Invigorates and the Embiggens. I don't count Vines and Royal Treatments as pump spells. They are protection spells, and Vines, sure, sometimes you get them, but that's not why it's there. Let's be real. But Embiggen has been the best pump spell, been printed since Invigorate, I think. And it's one of the cards that, since it's only very recently been put on Magic Online, people have not been able to play with it. I unfortunately have not been playing a lot on Magic Online recently, so I haven't been able to show the power level. As soon as I have more time, definitely that's something that I wanted to try. But I think the card is very good, and people have... I don't know. I've never seen anyone else really playing online with Embiggens. unfortunately. But I think that's one of the best things that Infect has been needing in a long while, because I don't think that creatures are the problem with the deck. So that's something that I hear occasionally as well, where people think that the Infect creatures are too small right now to actually make the difference. That's not true. If they are 1/1 or 2/2, it really doesn't change all that much, right? I'm going to use 2 pump spells and you're dead.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what the additions are. The pump spells are what matters, and the Embiggen is the thing that we needed. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. If they print a 1/1 unblockable creature for 1 blue, sure, that's an upgrade.
Yeah, of course, I'm in.
Sure, but yeah, exactly. But you don't. That's not if that's not what the first thing that I was looking towards. I would want, if I could have to choose between better creatures or better pump spells, I would always pick better pump spells. Because right now in the Bowmasters meta, every pump spell I play saves my threats. Every single one.
Yeah.
Always. I don't have to, when we were playing like Become Amends in the past, that required Delve. In the early games, it was bad. Scale Up, I played that occasionally, but that's a sorcery, so that's worse.
Yeah.
And now we don't need to. We don't need any. We don't have any downsides. We can just play Embiggen. It always works. Always 1 green, instant speed. Yeah, it's great.
And I think, you know, for the most part, +4 is what is the sweet spot, right? Like, obviously, if this was just a giant growth, we wouldn't be playing it. But +4 is the sweet spot because that turns your guy into a 5/5. And then Berserk gets you the 10, right? So that's really where you want to be. The +5, even better. Like, you know, especially because you're getting trample, and maybe your opponent's blocking with the Delver. It doesn't matter. You're still going to trample over that and do 12. You know, a total of +12. It's going to be enough to kill your opponent. So to me, that +4 is the real sweet spot, which is what you get with Invigorate.
I agree, and especially with Inkmoth Nexus, being +5 is just so great because then you don't even need, if that's just 2 spell spells, is lethal immediately. If I like attack with Inkmoth Nexus, I am Embiggen, Invigorate, that's 10. Well, usually that's just 9. You know, the thing is, if we play our combo right, our combo costs 1 green mana, which is silly. That's like that's a stat that you just can't beat. 1 green mana to kill you. That's still a power level that Infect has, right?
Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned. Yeah, the fact that the whole deck sort of supports itself too. You know, you're saying like this protects all my guys from removal or whatnot. You know, damage-based removal at the very least, is really great because, you know, you don't always cast Embiggen or Invigorate to win the game. Sometimes you're just like, I need my guy on the board, right? And it's flexible like that. You know, it's not where you want to be. You don't want your opponents to be trying to kill your creatures. You'd rather they just go no blocks and be completely tapped out. But the fact that you can use your game-ending spells to change up and be like, oh, I'm going to protect my plan, right? You don't get that in Storm. You know, like there's no Storm deck that's like, oh, hold on, like I'm going to change my whole plan, and at the expense of me winning this turn, I'll stop you from screwing up my game plan. Like that's a deck that's all in all the time for the most part on their one plan. They're very single-mindedly focused on getting there. But one of the great things about Infect is that aside from having that backup plan to protect your guys with your spells, sometimes you're just chipping in. Most of the time, I would say you're chipping in.
Happens all the time. That's why I say that usually 1 pump spell is good enough. Because if you, I mean, it's like swinging in. If I invigorate my threat and I deal 5 infect damage, I can now just chill. I can now just play like Delver Plan, attack 2 times. Who knows? If I draw a pump spell at any given time, I can just win out of nowhere. So very often, indeed, you don't. The deck, everyone knows it from like the turn 2 Invigorate Berserk, and that happens. Don't get me wrong, it happens. But if I would watch at my games and I would analyze them, that's a minority by far. Very often, you don't want to do that because again, if they swords and you don't have anything, you're gonna lose. So you want to be very, very safe with the way you're playing. You said recently that it doesn't stop all removal spells, and that's true, right? The thing is, Embiggen in a Bowmasters meta, it does, and that's why it's so good right now. Invigorate and Embiggen, they save all our creatures against the Bowmasters, which is everywhere. A lot of decks are relying on Bowmasters to win the game and removal, especially against Infect. And in general, if we are getting new pump spells that are both aggressive and defensive, that's where we want to be. And that's, well, I'm not sure if we can talk about it already, but the upcoming card, Legalos' Quick Reflexes.
Yeah, let's talk about
works,
it. Yeah.
Finally, I'm so happy that I can talk about it. It would be nice to put it on screen right now because
it's definitely gonna be on screen. Let me read it real fast so that everybody knows where we're at with that card.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know what it does.
Quick Reflexes is an instant. This is coming out in the Middle Earth Commander thing that's coming out during Christmas time.
November the 3rd.
November the 3rd. There you go.
I think so. Yeah.
1 green mana for an instant. It has Split Second. For those of you who don't know Split Second, as long as the spell's on the stack, players can't cast spells or activate abilities that aren't mana abilities. So, boom, this is happening unless you have mana abilities. There's nothing you can do about it, right? Untap target creature. Until end of turn, it gains Hexproof. Reach. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, it deals damage equal to its power to up to 1 target creature.
Yes.
This is both removal, protection, and in a pinch you can block a Delver or something if you're gonna die, right? You're get my guy reach.
Zach, honestly, it does if Wizards had come to my house and said, hey Sam, you know what? Here you go. You can make a new card for Infect. I was like, I'm not gonna make this one because they would never allow me to do such a silly thing. And now they printed it, right? Yes. I saw that card getting spoiled and I didn't see it myself. People were just texting me, and the day it got leaked, I got 4 to 5 messages asking me, "Have you seen this card? Do you think it will be good?" And I didn't at that time. And when I came home, I saw the card. I just immediately, and I'm not joking, I pre-ordered 4 of the boxes. I didn't even know at that time if it was real or it was coming. It seemed very real, so I just ordered them immediately. I got them for a very cheap price, and I think this is going to be insanely good, and it's probably the best pump spell. Well, I'm not going to say pump spell, protection spell ever. I've been playing a lot with this card in real life already. My buddies, they allow me to test with it, and I actually played on Friday. We're recording on Sunday, so 2 days ago. Just a little thing against Delver that can just show you how good the card is. Right, I start with Noble. My opponent plays Darcy, so Dragon's Rage Channeler. Mm-hmm. My turn, I play Inkmoth Nexus. And I pass. They start by playing Wasteland, and they wasteland my Inkmoth Nexus. And in my head, I'm like, this is just too good to be true, right? So what I do is I tap my Inkmoth Nexus for colorless mana. Yep. I animate itself with the colorless mana. Then I put the Legalos on Inkmoth Nexus.
Oh,
so they can't respond. My Inkmoth Nexus untaps. It's a land, so I can tap it for mana. So I tap it for mana. That means it gets tapped. So I destroy their Dragon's Rage Channeler. My turn. So they 2 for 1 themselves, and I for 1 green mana had an uninteractable thing to kill their creature and prevent my threat from dying. So this is just one example. I've been testing with this card a lot, and the more I play with it, the more I think that this is going to put Infect for sure back on the map, and I think a lot of players will come back because I've been getting a lot of private messages from people actually asking me the question, do you think I should buy in again? And I always say, I don't want to decide that, but I do think that if you ever want to give Infect a go again, November will be the time because after testing with this, it is insane. And I think on Friday I played 30 games and I probably won 25 of them. The deck has never
card looks so silly.
It is. Against Control, I recently played against Mark Vogt when I was in Bologna for the Four Seasons tournament. You probably know Four Seasons, right?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Mark was there, winner of the last Legacy Grand Prix in Bologna. Funny thing. And I know Mark. We actually we play a lot together, sometimes online, and he just crushes me every single time. He's such a good player. I have 0 chance against him. And I asked him, Mark, can I test Legolas? And he said, sure, man, if I can test of the Beanstalk. He was trying that one out. And we played, I don't know how many games we played, but every single game was very 50-50. And I don't remember our score, but it was at least 50% for me, which was already insane how much it changed the matchup. Every single time I had the card in my hand, I didn't feel like I could lose. It was that powerful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's important to explain to people why it's so good. Split second your opponent's not able to even get your guy off the board. So let's put ourselves in a scenario where you have 2 green mana and a Glistener Elf, and your opponent doesn't have blockers, right? Yeah. You're just like, okay, during my turn, I will make my guy hexproof. Or even if they do have a guy, right? Like, let's say they have
that's the thing.
A Tarmogoyf,
it's removal.
Right? Like, exactly. They have a Tarmogoyf, right? You're like, okay, I'll make my guy hexproof, and there's nothing you can do about it. Then,
no, and the reason why it's so good in Infect is, like, when is your opponent going to use their removal, right? Like, if I start in the combat step against, like, Delver, and I start with Invigorate, what very often happens these days is my opponent plays Bowmasters. Okay, so they target my threat. In response, I will use Legalos. That means the ability fizzles, so you do not get the Orc. Yep. Now, I also have a 5/5. I'm going to attack. I'm going to kill your Orc. And now what happens? They can't respond to this. So the split second is
you're
really
like,
the thing.
I'll berserk, and now you're dead.
Exactly. Yeah. And the example I gave you like a couple of minutes ago, because I can see people saying that, yeah, but your opponent played wrong. They should have just wastelanded in your turn. And we actually discussed that exact situation. I told my friend back then, do you think that's true? Because let's hypothetically do that, right? You wait for my turn. In my upkeep, you wasteland Inkmoth Nexus. Okay, same thing. I'm going to animate my Nexus. It will animate itself. I'm going to use Legalos. That means it has hexproof. It untaps.
And now,
my every pump spell I use in my turn now kills you. So do you really think that's better? I'm not saying it is.
I mean,
I just don't know.
Yeah.
It's just, it makes removal for your opponents so awkward. And when I was playing against Mark, he said the same thing. I have no idea right now when I have to use my removal spells.
Well,
and that's
Sam. Here's something I just put together that's kind of wild.
I'm very curious now.
Yeah, let's put ourselves in a situation where you're attacking into their, let's say Murktide region that and they've got some number of infect, right? You're attacking into their Murktide region with your Inkmoth Nexus, right?
Mm-hmm.
You cast Legolas Quick Reflexes on it, right?
Yeah.
And you pump your you pump it to a 5/5, and you're already attacking, and you say, okay, let's go to blocks, and they go, okay, I'll block my my 5/5 against your 5/5, right? You can then tap it for mana, which taps it, deal 5 damage to their let's say it doesn't kill it. Let's say it's a 6/6, right? Deal 6 damage to their Murktide region. Right? So it's still like got 1 toughness left, and then cast Berserk and trample over the rest.
Oh yeah.
So it's already got damage on it. So all the rest of the damage is going to carry over to the opponent, right? So there's like some really cool tricks you can do in combat against blockers. That,
for sure.
That like, especially, Inkmoth Nexus specifically, because it has that tap ability to make mana, is you could really put your opponent into a weird spot where they just can't even block properly.
No, that's the thing. Split second makes it so powerful because you just cannot interact with this. The best thing you can do against Infect is keep your removal spells. And with Legolas, that's just no longer the case because, again, every single time I had Legolas in my hand, I felt like, okay, if I play this right, I cannot lose.
Yeah.
It's if I can compare this is Infect's Allosaurus Shepherd, right? When Elves got Allosaurus Shepherd, it was perfect for their deck specifically, and they gave them a massive boost. And I think this is what Infect has been needing for a long while, because it's protection, the best protection ever, because it just works, period. 1 green, split second. But on top of this, we get something that Infect has never had unless you splashed colors, which is removal spell. You can remove a threat with this, and it works alongside, as I said before, it's going to be both aggressive and defensive. And if we get this, that's a scary tool to give Infect. And I've been seeing that people are saying that this is also going to be good in depths, and I agree with you there. But I think it's going to be even better in Infect, because depths, they are still going to be very, very vulnerable to Wasteland, which has been always good against them. And that's not true for Infect, of course. So don't get me wrong, I think depths surely will get a boost, but if there's one deck that will benefit the most from this, it's going to be Infect. And in my builds that I've been trying out recently, I'm playing 4, and I wish I could play 8. But it's just
it's very good.
It's that good, honestly. It's insane. So I'm looking forward to November, and it's funny because I just said that I'm not playing a lot on Magic Online anymore because ever since this card got spoiled, I just I just haven't felt a lot of wanting to play on Magic Online because I want to play with Legalos. I actually on Twitter I posted a couple of days ago and I asked Daybreak Games, are you going to be able to put Legolas on day one on Magic Online because I want to have that card immediately. I could tell you more and more funny game situations that I had with Legolas but it keeps coming, and a lot of weird things that I encounter while I'm playing that I hadn't even thought about. It's going to be.
It feels like this card has like 2 more lines of text than it should, right? Like that's exactly how I feel about it. I'm like, if it just had hexproof and split second, it'd still be playable.
I'd probably play it.
Untap and this other ability, like what?
Yeah. Even the reach. The reach is so awkward.
The reach. Yeah,
I was able to one time block a Murktide Regent, give my Glistener Elf reach, just to block Murktide, and then just slam it with Inkmoth Nexus on the way back.
Stay alive. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they can't respond to this because it will happen. And my opponent showed like his hand with like 2 Force Wills. I don't care. I mean, it's that's why I compare it to Allosaurus Shepherd. I could go on over this card like forever. It's so strong, and I can't wait to play with this because I'm going to Eternal Weekend Europe, and it will be legal by then because Eternal Weekend in Europe is like November 17, I think. So I'm gonna try and surprise some people.
Man, I wish I had my Trop still, man. It just feels like, I mean, to that point, like I still give Infect a lot of props in that, like right now I'm playing 8-cast and I'm playing Death Shadow because those are the decks that I can afford. Being able to play with Shocklands or like not having to play with dual lands at all, right? And I'm still giving Infect its props in that I'm playing a bug version of Death Shadow, so I can splash green for Berserk because that card's so good.
Yeah, it is. Berserk is very good, not for sure.
Being able to just be like, hey, okay, I'm playing against a deck that has, like, for me, it was always, as a rugged over player, playing against Elves was a nightmare because it's like, okay, I'll attack my guy. Oh, I'll block with the Elvish Spirit Guide, and I'll bounce it back to my hand and draw a card, and you're just like, there's nothing you can do. It's just like you either win with Delver or you lose, right? So being able to just be like, okay, well, I'll attack with my 12 Death Shadow, right? And they're like, okay, I'll block with my Elvish Spirit Guide and bounce to my hand and you're like, cool, Berserk. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, you take 24 damage. Being able to play a card that just like completely blanks the whole idea of like, oh, I'll just infinitely block your guys, or like I'll block with my Baleful Strix or whatever. Berserk is such a dumb Magic card that like it just doesn't get the props that it really should to me. And even outside of Infect, even there are several times where I look at a situation, I'm just like, this whole deck could be made better if you just added Berserk to it. But it's not always because it doesn't have the same versatility as say Embiggen, Invigorate, Legolas' Quick Reflexes. It is only an offensive card for the most part.
I could tell you a lot of stories about Berserk being defensive.
Yeah, as well as I do when your opponent reanimates Elishnorn. If they attack with it, that's the dumbest possible thing they can do.
Exactly, it happens.
I will gladly take 8 to get that off the board.
Yeah, exactly. That exact situation happened.
So, I've done it a few times. How many times have you? So I don't get to play the mirror a lot, but I did in that tournament I was talking with Gerard Fabiano. I did play early rounds. I played against another Infect deck, and I got the guy with the Vines of Vastwood trick, and we had to call a judge.
Oh, nice! Yeah, it happens. I actually have
like, I'll counter your spell by casting this thing that gives it Shroud, basically.
Yeah, exactly. I actually remember playing a finals of a tournament that's still on YouTube, by the way. That footage of that was me Infect against Infect. That was pretty cool. Of course, I feel very, very happy in the mirror because I know the deck very well.
Of course. The deck, yeah.
And we had a lot of situations that were just so funny because I remember at times where I think the game got decided. My opponent attacked with Glistener Elf into my Glistener Elf, and I just waited. They invigorated, they berserked, and I'm like, okay, that puts me to 9. Okay, fine. And then they invigorate again, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna invigorate my elf. That means I only take 9. They've used their entire hand. It's like weird stuff like that, right?
Yep.
it's interesting for sure, definitely. Yeah, Legolas. I mean, Zach, if I don't know, once the card gets printed, you're probably gonna have to try Infect again because
Yeah,
I think
we'll
at
try
least try it
Infect
out.
with shop
Yeah,
lands.
I mean, yeah, sure. Why not? Why not? Who knows?
So Sam, do you play any? Like you said, you've been playing Infect for about 10 years. Do you play any other deck archetypes?
Yes, but never competitively.
Yeah,
I mean,
fair.
I play a lot of archetypes. I have a very dedicated friend group here in the country where I live, and we come together every week. Not that I can make it every week, but there's a group. If you want to play, you can play every week. Like there's always some guys playing, and we have. I mean, I live in Belgium, and we have a lot of very good players here. There's not like it's a big country or anything, but we have in my group, for example, we have like 3 Grand Prix top 8ers, just to show that even though it's a small country, the players are dedicated. So it's not like I'm playing against scrubs or anything like that. Far from it. And I test a lot of archetypes just for fun against these people. And I've been saying for years now that one day I will go to a tournament and play with a different deck than Infect. And then as soon as I want to leave to the tournament, I'm like, nah, not today.
Yeah, no, today's not that day.
I still know that the best one. So I actually do enjoy other archetypes, but I've never played it competitively. Although that's not true. I think I played in one tournament where I did not play Infect, which was the time when Ren and 6 was legal. I stopped playing Infect 2 times in my entire Magic career, which was once when Ren and 6 was legal, because that was just the only time I stopped playing is when something was just so obviously broken that I knew it was going to get banned sooner or later.
From Infect back to Rug Delver when that card got spoiled. I was like, all right, we're back.
Exactly, and I can see why. And that's the timing when I played Grixis Delver in a tournament. I actually did really well. I think I went 5-2 in that tournament. I just missed top 8, and I had a horrible time, and I never touched the deck again. So that just show you that I don't really care about that. I want to have fun when I'm playing for sure. And sure, if I would win a tournament but not have fun, I would not play the deck again. I think for me, having fun with the deck is the most important thing. It's not like we're playing for high stakes or anything when you're playing Legacy, right? So play what you enjoy. I think
no one's going to the Pro Tour off of Legacy. Yeah,
actually, I did. Once.
Yeah, I think. Oh, there you go. Yeah,
but that's where very very weird situation where they had like in the Magic card market in Paris they had like one slot for the Pro Tour. I don't even know how they managed it, but I got that one then. It was so weird. And then it was Corona, so I still had to play at home. So I was like, that's just so silly. No, I mean you have to play for fun.
Yeah, Ren and 6 was so good during that era that I built Rug Delver in Vintage and just threw Collector Wolves into the Delver spot, and I top 8'd a Vintage tournament.
Yeah, I mean, card strong.
You know what's a really good card to retrace in Vintage?
I don't know anything about Vintage, so
we'll just think about the Power 9, right? Like, what card would you like to be able to just retrace over and over again?
I mean, Black Lotus, I guess.
Well, retrace is only instants and sorceries.
Exactly. So you can see my knowledge about Ren and 6 and
the card I'm getting at is it's really good to retrace Time Walk.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
Normally people are like, oh, Ancestor Recall, so good. You just draw all the cards. I'm like, yeah, you can draw all the cards or you can take all the turns.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
There were several times where my opponent was like, okay, well then just present your win condition. I'm like, see this Collector Wolf? It's going to attack you 10 times.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. I've never played Vintage, unfortunately. I
just 6 with Strip Mine was like a whole different monster, man. Like just feel like a whole different power level.
Is Ren 6 banned in Vintage?
No, it's totally legal. So at that time, so this was in an event called the Mana Drain. At that time, the big card was Dreadhorde Arcanist. So everyone was playing Dreadhorde Arcanist using basically like blue-red Delver, Lightning Bolts, rebuying their Ancestral Recall and stuff like that. And I was like, I think if I just play 4 Collector Wolf and then play like the normal Rug Delver pattern and like just throw a couple of artifacts, like throw the red, green, blue Moxes in the deck and of course the Black Lotus, and I play Narsets, and because everyone was playing Narset at the time, instead of playing Jace the Mind Sculptor, because everyone's also playing Pyroblast, I'll just play Chandra Torch of Defiance, which does technically draw you an extra card every turn, but it's that like exile situation. And that card was so good because it got around everyone's Narsets. I could just ignore everyone's Narsets because I wasn't playing like Brainstorm and stuff.
Yeah.
I was just like, I'll just play the normal cards I was gonna play. You only get one Brainstorm in that format, and between Narsets and Ren and 6, you do Ren and 6, and then you like ping their Narset because it's at 1. It was a wild time. They had this thing where I won my first round, lost my second round, and in the third round I got paired up against the person who was like the top player in the tournament, who was at like this they call it the win and in table, like the feature match area, and it was a winner stays, loser pays kind of situation. So yeah. I sat at that table for the rest of the tournament because I just won every match after that, just like on a deck that no one was really looking at. Obviously, this is not the point of this interview. is for me to just tell you about how good Ren and 6 was. But man,
I feel you. Yeah, Ren and 6. That was just shows you that
That's how I felt about the way you feel about Legalos Quick Reflexes. Is how I felt about Ren and 6.
I imagine. Yeah, the card was so powerful that if a card gets me to stop playing Infect, that should say you something. That's just and Dreadhorde Arcanist, we already mentioned it. That's the time when I didn't stop playing, but I actually created a rug Infect list that was playing Dreadhorde Arcanist, and I actually used the card where we needed it for. I used pump spells with Dreadhorde. That was pretty fine.
And most of the deck is 1-drop spells, so like you can I guess I'll brainstorm here. This is a free brainstorm. I like that. Yeah,
exactly.
Awesome. So, final notes. So we've got your deck lists in the bottom. Obviously, we're going to put all your links and stuff below. But is there anywhere people should look for you online?
Definitely. I make dedicated Infect content. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that I really like the deck already. And I make YouTube content. I used to stream on Twitch, but I just don't have that much time anymore. I became a father, and I now have a daughter about 1.5. So ever since becoming a father, I swapped YouTube because I can now just record when I have the time to. And it's all the same. It's just FenrusCloud. I am also on Twitter, and I have a Patreon where I make sideboard guides for the deck every month, where I have an update on the meta. So if you want to play Infect in the future, you can consider checking out the YouTube and Patreon. If you want to follow me personally, I would recommend going to Twitter. You could follow me on Twitch. I may sometime ever use Twitch again to stream, but I don't know. For the time being, that's on a pause. But I'm still making content, and I'd love to see you all there.
Awesome. Well, Sam, thanks so much. It's been a blast talking to you.
Okay, Zach, thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a good one, man.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. If you have the means to support the channel, please check us out on Patreon and check out this next video. It's pretty great.